After divorce, Nicole Kidman completely exposes Keith Urban. For nearly 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban stood as one of the most durable love stories Hollywood and Nashville ever produced together. An Oscar-winning actress and a chart-topping country star who somehow made a marriage survive rehab stints, relentless touring schedules, and the corrosive glare of two industries that eat relationships alive. Then, in the fall of 2025, it ended. Court filings confirmed what insiders had been whispering for months. Kidman had filed for divorce after 19 years of marriage. What followed wasn't a scorched-earth public war. It was something stranger and, in its own way, more revealing. A fast, quiet legal split, a string of loaded moments on Keith Urban's tour stage, and months of near-total silence from Nicole herself, broken only once, carefully, on her own terms. To understand why this ending landed the way it did, you have to go back to who these two people were before they ever met, because the story of their marriage was really the story of two very different kinds of survival colliding. The shy girl who became Hollywood royalty. Nicole Mary Kidman was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, in 1967 to Australian parents who were living there temporarily. Her father, Anthony Kidman, was a biochemist and clinical psychologist. Her mother, Janelle, worked as a nurse and was active in the women's rights movement. The family returned to Sydney while Nicole was still young, and it was there, in a household that valued both intellect and discipline, that she grew up. Contrary to the poised, self-possessed image she'd later project on red carpets, young Nicole was famously shy, the kind of shy where being called on in class could make her blush to the roots of her hair. She found her outlet in performance. Ballet came first, then drama classes, then youth theater, where the emotions she struggled to voice in ordinary conversation could pour out through a character instead. By her teens, her talent was impossible to ignore, and Australia's film industry, smaller than Hollywood's but hungry for fresh faces, gave her an early runway. She landed television work and a role in the 1983 cult film BMX Bandits, and from there her career accelerated quickly. Directors noticed not just her striking height and porcelain features, but her emotional range, and by the late 1980s, Hollywood was paying attention. It was during this rise that she met Tom Cruise, her first marriage, and by her own later accounts, one of the more painful chapters of her life. They married in 1990 and became one of the most photographed couples on the planet. When that marriage ended in 2001, Kidman lost more than a husband. She has spoken in later years about the anguish of the custody arrangement involving their two adopted children, Isabella and Connor, and about how disorienting it was to feel pushed to the margins of her own children's day-to-day lives. That wound shaped her. By the time she crossed paths with Keith Urban a few years later, she was a woman who had rebuilt her career, won an Academy Award for The Hours, and cemented her status as one of the finest actresses of her generation. But she was also someone who understood, in a very specific and personal way, what it cost to lose a family. A guitar, a small town, and a long road to sobriety. Keith Lionel Urban was born in 1967 in Whangarei, New Zealand, though his family relocated to Queensland, Australia, while he was still a small child. His father ran a convenience store, but had a genuine passion for American country music, an unusual taste in suburban Australia at the time, and he passed that love directly to his son, putting a guitar in Keith's hands by around age 6. Urban was performing publicly not long after, and by his teens, he was already playing talent shows in small venues, building both his sound and the image that would define him. The long-haired, guitar-driven outsider, with one foot in country tradition and the other in rock showmanship. He left school to chase music full-time, because for Urban there was never really a plan B. He built a career in Australia through the late 1980s before making the move to Nashville in the early 1990s, chasing the kind of recognition the much larger American country scene could offer. It took years of grinding through the Nashville circuit before his self-titled American debut album broke through in 1999, turning him into one of the genre's most recognizable new stars, known for his guitar virtuosity, his stage presence, and a voice built for heartbreak songs. Urban has also been open, across many interviews over the years, about his long struggle with substance abuse and the repeated stints in treatment that punctuated his rise to fame. By the time he met Kidman in 2005, sobriety was still something he was actively fighting for rather than something he'd secured. That struggle would become one of the defining threads of his marriage, not as a secret, but as something the couple dealt with together, publicly and painfully, more than once. Meeting, marrying, and the first real test. Kidman and Urban met at the Day USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005, events celebrating Australians working in the American entertainment industry. By her own later account, the initial spark wasn't instant. He was polite but reserved, and months passed before he actually called her. When he finally did, things moved quickly. By the following year, they were engaged, and on June 25, 2006, they married in a ceremony at Sydney's Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on the Manly Peninsula, a wedding that mixed Hollywood wattage with unmistakable Australian warmth. The marriage was tested almost immediately. Only months after the wedding, Urban entered rehab for alcohol abuse, a jarring, very public start to a union that had just been sold to the world as a fairy tale. Kidman, by most accounts, chose to stand by him through it, and Urban has since credited her, in various interviews over the years, with playing a real role in helping him hold on to sobriety during that period. It set an early pattern for marriage, real affection, real crisis, and a couple that kept choosing, publicly and repeatedly, to work through it rather than walk away. They went on to build a genuinely full life together. Kidman continued a prolific film career, moving between major studio projects and smaller, critically acclaimed work. Urban became one of country music's most decorated stars, racking up Grammy wins and packed arena tours. They welcomed two daughters, Sunday Rose in 2008 and Faith Margaret in 2010, and by all outward appearances built a family that balanced two demanding, high-visibility careers with a genuine commitment to keeping their kids' lives as normal as possible. For years, they were held up, accurately, as far as the public record shows, as one of the rare celebrity marriages that seemed to actually work. The separation, the unraveling, when it came, wasn't dramatic in the tabloid sense. According to reporting from outlets including E! News, the couple had quietly been living separately since early summer 2025, well before anything became public. There was no single scandal driving the split, no one incident that outlets could point to. What surfaced instead was a slower picture, a marriage that had been under strain for some time, playing out privately while the public still saw a united couple at events like the FIFA Club World Cup in Nashville over the summer. Notably, Kidman posted an anniversary tribute to Urban that June, marking 19 years of marriage, and he responded with a heart emoji but no post of his own, a small, easy-to-miss detail that in hindsight read very differently once the separation became public in late September. On September 30th, 2025, Kidman filed for divorce in Davidson County, Tennessee, where the couple had maintained their family home, citing irreconcilable differences. The filing was notably restrained, no salacious allegations, no public airing of grievances. A marital dissolution agreement and parenting plan were submitted the same day. Under the terms, Kidman was granted primary residential custody of their two daughters, with Urban receiving parenting time every other weekend, and both parents retaining joint decision-making authority over major issues in the girls' lives. Both sides waived spousal and child support, a detail multiple outlets flagged as a sign the couple's finances had likely been handled separately for some time, and a sign, too, that this was headed toward a comparatively amicable resolution rather than a drawn-out legal fight. That's exactly how it played out. The divorce was finalized on January 6, 2026, just over 3 months after the filing, remarkably fast for a marriage of that length and profile. The settlement kept the same core terms from the original filing: primary custody with Kidman, alternating weekend time with Urban, and a parenting agreement that explicitly committed both parents to avoid speaking negatively about each other in front of their daughters, and to actively encourage the girls to maintain close relationships with both parents. Legal commentators covering the case pointed to that speed and cooperation as unusual for a split of this size, suggesting both parties had prioritized keeping things civil for their children's sake over drawing out a public fight. The concert, the lyrics, and the speculation. If the legal filing was quiet, the loudest public moment of the entire split came from Urban's stage, not from any courtroom. Days after news of the split broke, fans noticed Urban performing without his wedding ring. Then came the lyrics. At a show in Omaha in late September, during his song The Fighter, a track written by Urban's own account about the early days of his relationship with Kidman, he swapped the original line, "When they're trying to get to you, baby, I'll be the fighter," for "When they're trying to get to you, Maggie, I'll be your guitar player," directing the moment at touring guitarist Maggie Baugh. It was enough to make headlines on its own, and it fed rumors, reported by outlets including Fox News and TMZ, though never confirmed by either Urban or Kidman, that another relationship might have played a role in the split. Those rumors have remained just that, rumors, with no on-record confirmation from anyone involved. Then, at his first show after the divorce news broke in Hershey, Pennsylvania on October 2nd, Urban performed his 2002 breakup anthem, "You'll Think of Me," and changed the line, "Take your space and take your reasons," to "Take your space and your stupid bullshit reasons." He performed it again with variations at subsequent shows, and by the final stop of the tour in Nashville on October 17th, he'd had enough of the speculation swirling around it. Before playing an acoustic version of the song, he told the crowd directly, "I've been covering like this for a long time. Stop reading shit into it." He then sang the modified lyrics anyway, shouting, "But I bet you think about me," over the original closing line. It's worth being straightforward about what's actually known here versus what's speculation. Urban himself, on record, pushed back hard against the idea that the lyric changes were a coded message to or about Kidman, and longtime fans back him up, pointing out he's altered that particular lyric in live shows for well over a decade, long before he ever met her. The Maggie swap in The Fighter is harder to wave away as simple habit, and it clearly read as significant to a lot of people in the audience, but even there, neither Urban nor Kidman has ever confirmed what, if anything, it meant. What actually happened is a musician working through a very public breakup in the most natural venue available to him, on stage, through the songs he already knew how to sing. Nicole's silence, and what she finally said. What makes this story genuinely different from the standard celebrity divorce playbook is what Kidman didn't do. She didn't give interviews. She didn't post statements. She didn't respond to the rumors swirling around Urban's tour. For months, while headlines speculated about another woman and parsed every lyric change for hidden meaning, Kidman said nothing at all. She spent the holidays in Australia with her daughters, posting a simple family photo captioned, "Looking forward into 2026, as the new year began," a small, deliberate signal that she was choosing her family and her privacy over any kind of public reckoning. It wasn't until March 2026, in an interview with Variety timed to promote her Prime Video series Scarpetta, that Kidman addressed the divorce at all, and even then, on her own terms and in remarkably measured language. "Last year I was quiet. I had other things going on. I was in my shell," she said, describing how she'd spent most of 2025 largely out of the spotlight while working through the separation privately. Asked directly how she was doing since the split, she said simply, "I am, because I'm always going to be moving toward what's good," adding that what she was most grateful for was my family and keeping them as is and moving forward. She was explicit about where her boundary sat. "Everything else I don't discuss out of respect. I'm staying in a place of we are a family, and that's what we'll continue to be." The only other note of real warmth in the interview came when she spoke about her daughters, now teenagers, calling them "my beautiful girls, my darlings, who are suddenly women." That's the entirety of what Nicole Kidman has said publicly about the end of her marriage. No exposé, no score settling, no confirmation or denial of the rumors that dogged Urban's tour. If anything, her restraint has become the story in its own right, a conscious, repeated choice to protect her children and her ex-husband's privacy rather than use the platform of very public divorce to say more. Two different ways of handling an ending. Set side by side, the two halves of this story tell you something real about who these people are independent of the marriage itself. Urban processed his breakup the way he's processed everything for 30 years, out loud on a stage, through the songs that have always been his language, sometimes messily, sometimes ambiguously, and eventually with a blunt public request that people stop trying to decode him. Kidman processed hers the opposite way, privately, protectively, and almost entirely off the record, breaking her silence only once, briefly, and only to reaffirm that her family, not the narrative around its ending, was what mattered to her. Neither approach reveals a villain. What the finalized settlement, the parenting agreement's explicit language about not speaking badly of each other, and Kidman's own careful words in March all point to is something less sensational than a scandal, but arguably more impressive. Two people who spent 19 years building a life together, watched it end, and whatever tension or heartbreak sat underneath, chose to end it without dragging their daughters or each other through the kind of public war their industries would have happily rewarded them for. In an era where celebrity divorces are so often fought out in dueling interviews and leaked court documents, Kidman and Urban's split stands out precisely because of how little either of them chose to say. That restraint, not any exposé, is the real ending to this particular Hollywood Nashville story.